In the history of my channel, I have put painstaking effort into detailing all of the aspects of delusions because I think delusions are pretty cool, actually. I don't enjoy experiencing them. I think it's terrifying, but from a learning standpoint, delusions are utterly fascinating. So much can happen to your mind. And delusions, I think, are one thing that take your mind to the furthest extreme. This is really where you can see just how far a person's mind can go. Unlike hallucinations, which are false sensory perceptions, things that may seem practically tangible because you can see, hear, taste, feel, and smell them, delusions are so abstract. They're beliefs. So you could believe that a person is in the same room as you with no evidence of another person there. You could believe that you are being tracked down and spied on with absolutely no evidence. You don't need a perception to believe these things. They're fundamentally ingrained in your beliefs. Now, while I love learning about delusions, I think I may have exhausted my efforts in learning as much as I possibly can on the internet. I mean, the internet can really only tell you so much, and I, in the past, was able to put in, keywords of things that had happened to me and understand, okay, there's a name for that, there's a definition, there's a description. Well, I've reached this tapped out place where I've found the definitions of everything that was on the internet, and now I'm left with the delusions that have no names. So as much as I would love to give you a more formal educational video today about some more cool delusions that I've come across, the reality is this is going to be purely off of my lived experience. I don't know what the terms would be for these delusions. I just know that they've happened to me, they were interesting, and they may be interesting to you too. So we're gonna go over today 3 delusions I've had that were mind-blowing, that are indescribable and undefinable. I would like to tell you about is what I like to call the Gigantism Delusion. And it is what it sounds like. It was a delusion in which I believed I was a giant. I kind of already am a giant. I mean, at least like as far as female body types go, I'm 6 feet tall. And I love being tall. I love being like the tallest person in the room. When I was in elementary school and we do the class photos with, the rows that you stand on, the tall kids would always be on the top row and I would be the only girl on the top row with all the boys, and I would be so proud because all my life I have wanted to be tall. I just didn't want to be a giant. The Gigantism Delusion was, it was sort of like a hallucination as well, in the sense that there was a false sensory perception, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it like a hallucination in the sense that I was seeing miniature people when I was a giant. I was perceiving things to be miniature, or at least normal sized in comparison to my massive stature. I believed that I was the queen of my realm, and my realm was the house I was renting with my ex-husband. I also believed that I was so tall that my mind had to translate everything around me into like scaled down versions of what they actually were. I'm really bad at explaining this part because I don't really know how to put it into words, but basically I believed that things like spools of thread and pine cones and lighters, honestly, were people, and they were so small compared to me that my mind would replace their image with the spool of thread or the pine cone or the lighter as a comparison to say, like, this is to scale like the size difference between you and the person. The person's so small that you can't even see them. They're so small that if you were their size, they'd be the size of a spool of thread. That was the rationale that my mind came up with. This was, I guess you'd say, entertaining, right? Now, psychosis isn't always positive. A lot of times it's very terrifying, but there were times that were, I guess I would say, amusing or even delightful. And believing that I was a massive giantess queen over a realm of pine cones and spools of thread, that was entertaining, honestly, because I would collect these objects that were all about that big to that big, and I would splay them out in front of me on the floor as if they were like a congregation of worshipers here to bestow their like love and adoration upon me, their leader. So I would literally be, preaching or like monologuing to a random crap pile of knickknacks and such, thinking that they for sure were listening. Like they actually were hanging on every word I said. Yeah, it was maybe a little bit of a grandiose delusion there too, because I felt so important, but it did also kind of get me into a little bit of trouble. One time I just so happened to be in the shower when a spider crawled up to my feet. And, I guess shower spiders are a thing. I find them in the shower sometimes. That's just a spidery place to hang out. And this spider was just kind of chilling with me. And I thought, oh my God, what a friendly little guy. Look at this nice little follower of mine, thinking that this was a human naturally. It wasn't a spider. It was a full-grown, who knows, like 5'9", 6'1" sized man in my mind. And so I started singing to my friend, believing that I was just hanging out with a buddy, like an actual person, and the motherfucker bit me. That stupid spider friend bit my toe, and I was alarmed. I was like, hey, you don't bite friends? I was, really upset by it actually, because I felt betrayed that one of my followers would bite me. Never occurred to me it was a spider. Not even once. Aside from the Gigantism Delusion, there was another delusion I had that was actually relatively common, and I was very surprised to find that this doesn't have a name. Usually if I search delusions that have happened to more than just me, that I know for a fact have happened to other people, there's an explanation for it. But this one, which is very, very common, didn't have a name, so I will just call it the pregnancy delusion. This is another delusion that is exactly what it sounds like. It is a delusion of being pregnant. I do not know why there is no information about that on the internet. Maybe I'm just really bad at searching. Who knows? The thing is that the pregnancy delusion is so ingrained in me that nothing can change my mind. I have had this delusion in pretty much every psychotic episode I've had. And sometimes it's a good delusion because I'm pregnant and I feel very maternal and I have that glow about me and I'm in love with my child and I'm planning for their future and I'm excited to meet them and I'm talking to them in my belly and I love them. I name them. I had a daughter named Hannah. I had a son named Evan. The only thing is these children never come to fruition. So much like a mother who miscarries and never gets to meet her child, I never got to meet my child. I believed just as realistically as if it actually were a pregnancy, so I consider it a spiritual miscarriage. I have had relationships with children that were never born. I have built bonds with unborn babies just to lose my children. So it can be a really, really traumatic delusion. I think it's one of the more realistic ones in the sense that the emotional toll it has from conceiving the child to carrying it to losing it is similar to if it really were to happen in existence. Now, the thing is that this isn't always a happy, joyous pregnancy. This isn't always a pregnancy that is, human, I guess I would say, because maybe half the time that I've had this delusion, it wasn't a child I was pregnant with, it was the Antichrist. And that is a completely different experience, let me tell you. Being pregnant with the Antichrist is like a totally different category of this delusion to me because it kind of falls into the religious delusion category, where I'm having delusions of, like Satan has impregnated me, and there are devil worshippers that are grooming me to bring their Antichrist child into the world. It does sort of cross that territory into religion. The thing is, though, that no matter how definitive the evidence is that I'm not pregnant, I still believe that I'm pregnant with the Antichrist. I went to a store and got pregnancy tests. I took 3 pregnancy tests. They all came back negative. And my thinking was, well, of course the devil would be so tricky that he would make sure his spawn didn't show up on a pregnancy test. So there was nothing that could change my mind. It was very, very scary to be pregnant with the Antichrist. I actually wanted to go to the hospital for an abortion at one point, but my ex-husband wouldn't take me. And yeah, it's distressing. It's not only distressing to have that kind of aspect where the religious delusion is bleeding into it, and you have this really scary pregnancy, and the father is literally Satan. And then also the really sad and tragic loss of a baby that you carried that never was born. They're both very distressing delusions, although they play out very, very differently. I think if I were to explain the differences in distress of these 2 types of pregnancy delusion, is that the Antichrist delusion is so paranoia driven, and there's a lot of heightened anxiety, and there's a lot of frantic, panic. It feels very urgent. I have to take care of this now. I have to get rid of this pregnancy in some way. I need to get out of this situation. The other one is distressing because it is such an emotional burden. It is such an emotional roller coaster. The highs and lows of pregnancy, of having a child that you're so in love with and then losing them. Yeah, I honestly think sometimes that I think part of the reason I don't want to have children is because of that delusion. It was so devastating to me to have my spiritual miscarriages and lose children that were never ever in existence, that I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to have children after that delusion. I guess that's kind of hard to explain. I don't know how to put into words the feelings and the hole in me that I feel when I think about having children after that delusion. Yeah, it's very emotional for me still. It did feel like a pregnancy. It was an emotional bond. When a woman is pregnant, she can't meet her child until it's born. And so and you have faith that there's something growing in you. You can't see it. You can't see delusions. You have to have faith in them. I had full and utter faith in the pregnancy I was going through, and to lose it was one of the more realistic delusions I've ever had. Again, I have found this to be a pretty common delusion. I know so many people who have experienced this. One thing is that I've had it when I've been sexually inactive, when I've been single and I haven't had a partner in months or years. I have had absolutely no sexual contact with anyone, but I would still believe I was pregnant. That's the thing about delusions, is not only does it feel so realistic, the evidence isn't there, and that makes absolutely no difference. I have even known a man who had this delusion, and that was really wild. He even got an ultrasound. He went so far as to get an ultrasound, and even knowing that he biologically could not have a child, he, similarly to my justification with the pregnancy test, felt that there was some kind of exception for him. There was some kind of a loophole that allowed him, of all people, to go through that. There's always a loophole. There's always a workaround. There's always a way that this must be plausible. And that's just the nature of delusions. Now, I think the pregnancy delusion can be somewhat nuanced because it seems plausible. If I were a very covert psychotic case, and people couldn't tell I was psychotic, and I were to go to work and say that I was pregnant, people would probably believe that, and then when there'd be no baby and I'd say I lost the baby, they would believe that. So that one I think is very nuanced. The next one I'm going to describe, I think, is honestly even more nuanced, because there's a lot of ways that this can be like picked apart and explained in different ways. There's a lot of ways that this can be like misread. Now, this next one, I also don't know the name for, but it's pretty associated with another symptom called confabulation. This last delusion is a delusion of false memories. And it's similar, if not the same, as confabulation. I don't really know for sure that they're the same thing, because I can see similarities in the two symptoms, but I do also think there are some big differences. Confabulation is a symptom of psychosis. Is it a delusion? I don't know. It's a symptom of a lot of things, and it's not necessarily delusional with these other things, because confabulation isn't a false belief, it's a false memory. And while a false memory may be delusional, a false memory can also just be a fabrication of an event that your mind creates to fill a hole where memory used to be, which is the case you see with a lot of confabulation patients who have Alzheimer's, dementia, TBI, stroke, lesions in the brain, whatever reason that may cause them to have impaired memory. I think of it like the phantom limb of memory, because if a phantom limb is a sensation of a limb that's lost, this would be the memory in place of lost memory. Like, I think of this with Charles Bonnet syndrome as well, that it's kind of like the phantom limb of vision loss, because with that hallucination, with the visual hallucination you have with macular degeneration or any other vision loss, it is replacing the lost vision with a hallucination. Confabulation is replacing the lost memory with a false memory. Not necessarily delusional, absolutely a symptom of schizophrenia. The same as a delusion? I just don't know. Now, there are two types of confabulation. There's provoked and spontaneous confabulation. And this is where I think it shows that it's not necessarily a delusion so much as it is a fabrication of an event. There's a difference, I swear. So spontaneous confabulation would be confabulation that just kind of comes out in conversation. It's a memory that a person recalls just spontaneously. And this could be something like, I honeymooned in Spain, when they got married in the courthouse and went out to lunch and never had a honeymoon. They wouldn't necessarily know this is a lie. It's not even technically a lie, but it's not true. It's a false memory that's believed as firmly as a delusion. I just think, especially with provoked confabulation, that you might not necessarily consider it a delusion. Provoked confabulation would be if someone were to prompt a person with a question and they replaced whatever answer they may normally remember with the confabulatory answer of a false memory. For instance, I think a great example is to say, who is the president? And a person were to say Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter hasn't been president in decades. And unfortunately, he died actually not that long ago. Rest in peace, buddy. And so that false memory is called upon. Delusions are more organic than that. You can't prompt a delusion. They exist. They just exist. They're not just spawned. While I may have referential delusions that are drawn from the things in my life that I associate as meaningful messages to myself, it's not that you were to say, you believe that light bulbs are the sun, and I suddenly believe that light bulbs are the sun. I guess this is even more nuanced than I thought, because I could easily see myself falling for that too. But nonetheless, I do have my reasoning, and I don't believe that they are the same thing. Confabulation and false memory delusions, I don't believe are the same thing. The delusions I've had of false memories were really, really involved, and nothing caused them to come into existence. It wasn't something that just sort of popped up in conversation. They were really deeply rooted in me, and they were so realistic that I had these huge plot lines and backstories behind these memories. They could be memories that spanned years. It could be like a pattern of events. It could be like, for instance, my relationship with my parents being distorted. I had a false memory of my relationship with my parents that led me to believe that they were manipulative in ways that they were not, that they were pressuring me to do things I didn't want to do. You know, I felt that they were stage parents who were trying to get me to become a child actor so that they could fulfill their own, you know, pathetic desires after being failed actors themselves, like for whatever reason. I was never pressured into anything. I was never pressured to be a child actor. Like, yeah, that wasn't even in the cards, but I was so certain that I had this major resentment against them, and I wouldn't talk to them for months. I also had like a completely changed sense of my own aspirations. You know, things that I don't even care about, that I wouldn't want to do today, I felt I had been robbed of as a child. For some reason, I believed that I had always wanted to be a surgeon, that my childhood dream was to grow up and become a surgeon. And it was like, if I was 5 years old and they asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd say, I want to be a surgeon. Are you kidding me? Really? I hate science. I don't like math. Like, I'm not a STEM person. I'm a creative. And I always wanted to be a children's book illustrator. That's what I wanted to be. So the belief that I wanted to be a surgeon was completely contrary to everything about me. I would suffer in that field. I am not built to be a surgeon. I don't have the mental stamina for that. I would cry cutting into a person. I wouldn't be able to handle even my first surgery. There's no way, but I was convinced. I was robbed of the opportunity to be a surgeon because I got pushed into the arts. Arts is my favorite thing in the world. I wasn't pushed into that. That's my passion. Now, the thing about what I've just spilled the beans about, you know, these two examples of being pressured into being a child star and being robbed of my opportunity to be a surgeon, what I think stands out to me about those two examples is that there's no real event in those memories. Those are memories of like patterns, right? Like the lifelong pattern of being pushed out of surgery and being discouraged from studying medicine, whatever that was. I don't have any memories of people telling me not to study medicine. I don't have any memories of people telling me I can't do that. I just have the belief that that was what happened to me. I don't need to have like conversations drilled into my mind from 10 years ago. I just knew that at such and such age, this was what was true. I knew that for however many years, this was the pattern. There was absolutely no other evidence. And like any delusion, there doesn't need to be evidence. So is it confabulation? Somebody tell me, honestly, because I talk out my ass a lot, honestly. I love learning about this stuff, but this video doesn't really have much research behind it because I fell short of finding anything on the internet about these subjects. I would love to hear from anyone in the comments what you know about the gigantism delusion, the pregnancy delusion, the false memory / confabulation delusion, because really, it's not just me who wants to throw out education to you guys. I want to be educated as well. If you have any insight into these delusions, please let me know, because I think that it would be really cool to see more information put out there about areas of psychosis that may not be as well known. Psychosis is so endlessly fascinating to me. I genuinely love learning about it. I think that learning about it has helped me to heal from it. I think it has helped me to see it with a more neutral lens, to have less stigma, to put out less stigma when I try to put out educational content. And unlike my other types of delusion videos, this one's not educational, it's anecdotal. And a lot of what I have to say is anecdotal, but this is my experience. This isn't universal. Yes, I've met other people who've had delusions similar to these, but I can't speak for everyone, and I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments, what your experiences with delusions. And if you have any interesting resources, articles, research papers that you'd like to share, throw them into the comments too, and we can start a discussion to bring a little more education to this rather informal video. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching my video. I truly appreciate it. I'd love your support in building my channel. So if you'd like, you can comment or subscribe or like, or even hit that bell for notifications to my future videos. I also have a merch store, so if you'd like to support me in that way too, you can check it out. There's a link to it in the description box below. You can find cool stickers and mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, etc. I put out videos every Thursday/Friday, so if you'd like to see more of my videos, there are plenty coming soon. You can also watch my TikTok compilations every Monday, and so if you're looking for more of my content, be sure to stick around. There's plenty more coming soon. I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks. Bye.